The cafe was a warm blur of espresso steam and low jazz, but all the noise just seemed to fade when Luna's hand brushed mine, reaching for the sugar. It wasn't a clumsy accident. Her fingers lingered, tracing the fine line of my wrist for a breath too long, and a jolt, pure, electric static, shot straight up my arm. I felt my lungs seize, a thick, sweet air catching in my throat. I looked up, and her eyes, that deep, impossible hazel, were already on mine. They held a challenge, a silent, knowing dare. "You okay, Alex?" she asked, her voice a low murmur barely cutting through the music, but the question was secondary to the way she leaned in, her body language turning the small table into a world of its own. My pulse hammered a frantic, irregular rhythm against my ribs, so loud I was sure she could hear it. I wanted to answer, but the words were a useless clutter compared to the overwhelming, charged silence between us. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken possibilities. I managed a weak nod, pulling my hand away, but the damage was done, the distance felt agonizing. She gave me a slow, private smile, a smile that promised everything and demanded nothing, before turning back to her phone, her thumb scrolling with casual indifference. That's when I saw it, the screen bright, open to her messaging app, a little red one over the drafts folder. I shouldn't have looked, but her phone was lying face up, and the first 3 words of the unsent message were visible just above the keyboard. I need to tell, we had been together for 4 years, 4 years built on late-night conversations about distant planets, and Sunday mornings tangled up in cheap cotton sheets. People looked at us, Alex and Luna, and saw permanence, the kind of easy, comfortable love that survived the petty squabbles of rent and career anxiety. But the truth was, our foundation was starting to show hairline fractures. The cracks weren't dramatic. They were subtle shifts in the daily routine. Luna had stopped asking me about my novel draft, the one she used to insist would make me famous. I, in turn, found myself editing the details I shared about my increasingly demanding job, knowing her eyes would glaze over with that familiar, weary expression of disconnection. We were 2 ships passing in the same home, charting separate courses while pretending to share a destination. A few months ago, the distance had felt suffocating. That's when Liam entered the orbit of our shared life, Luna's new photography colleague. He was all sharp wit and passionate intensity, the kind of energy I remembered in Luna before the quiet settling in of coupledom. I tried to dismiss the flicker of jealousy, the tightening in my chest when her phone buzzed with his name, but it was a constant, low thrum of anxiety. Despite the strain, the attraction between us was a stubborn current we couldn't cut off. Just last night, we were in the kitchen, the air cool from the open window. Luna was struggling to reach a mug on the top shelf. I moved behind her, my chest flush against her back, and reached up easily. For a moment we froze. The simple act of me helping her was suddenly heavy with history and need. Her head tilted back, her hair brushing my chin, and I felt that familiar, exhilarating rush, the desperate urge to close the remaining gap between us. I whispered her name, my lips near her ear, and she let out a small, shaky sigh that sounded like surrender. But then, the spell broke. She pulled the mug free, stepped away, and the intimacy dissolved, replaced by a quick, almost panicked smile. "Thanks, Alex," she said, her voice too bright. She grabbed her phone to check the time, or maybe to check a message. Now, sitting across from her in this cafe, the unsent draft I need to tell, was a silent bomb ticking between us. Was it about Liam? Was it about our future? The future we had mapped out so meticulously, the small apartment, the rescue dog, the far-off talk of maybe, someday, children? The thought of that meticulous plan unraveling made my palms sweat. I leaned forward, trying to appear casual as I took a sip of my cooling coffee. "So," I began, my voice deliberately even, "what were you just looking at? Work stuff?" Luna's eyes narrowed slightly, a subtle shift that told me I had stepped over an invisible line. She placed the phone face down on the table, her hand resting over it possessively. "Nothing important, Alex. Just organizing files." "Why?" The simple, defensive question hung in the air, transforming the innocent query into an accusation. My heart pounded, not from attraction this time, but from the sudden, chilling certainty that whatever was in that message, it was the key to understanding the silence, the distance, and the terrifying new world we were about to enter. The tension in the cafe was now a physical presence, wrapping itself around us like a thick blanket. Luna's defensive gesture with the phone, that quick, proprietary move, told me everything I needed to know, and the raw, stinging surge of jealousy was immediate. It tasted metallic and hot on my tongue. "Organizing files, huh?" I echoed, the tone sharper than I intended. I tried to pull back, to sound amused, but the mask slipped. "Or maybe, are you organizing a night out with Liam?" The hazel in her eyes hardened. She didn't deny it, she just met my gaze with an unsettling steadiness. "He's a colleague, Alex. We're working on a project. A project that requires late-night texts and hushed phone calls in the hallway," I countered, leaning in closer, lowering my voice so the intimacy felt like a confrontation. My hand rested on the table, perilously close to hers, and I felt the tremor in my fingers. She let out a short, dismissive laugh, but her breathing was visibly shallow. "You're being ridiculous. And you know what? That's the problem." "What's the problem, Luna? That I still look at you and feel like the room is tilted? That I remember every whispered promise we ever made?" I challenged, the hidden longing spilling out, messy and uncontrolled. The anger drained from her face, replaced by a deep, aching sadness that momentarily paralyzed me. For a fleeting second, the wall between us crumbled. Her eyes dropped to my mouth, and I saw the temptation flash there, the urge to surrender to the familiarity, to escape the conflict with a kiss that would silence the accusations. She shifted in her seat, that small movement pulling her closer. Our knees brushed under the table, and the accidental touch was a deliberate spark. My heart was a frantic drumbeat in my ears. She bit her lip, her gaze flickering down to the phone she was still guarding. "Alex," she whispered, her voice barely audible, thick with regret and an undeniable, forbidden want. "We can't keep doing this. We can't keep pretending everything is okay." She finally moved her hand, not to pick up the phone, but to slide it across the smooth table, right toward me. It was a silent, terrifying invitation. "Go ahead," she murmured, her eyes holding mine, a dare mixed with a plea for release. "Read it." Her challenge, read it, hung between us, potent and terrifying. The cafe suddenly felt too bright, too public, yet we were locked in this desperate bubble of our own making. I stared at the phone lying on the table, a sleek, black talisman holding the truth. My entire future was contained in that one over-the-drafts folder. I didn't immediately reach for it. Instead, I focused on Luna, trying to decipher the unreadable intensity in her eyes. There was defiance, yes, but also a deep, vulnerable fear, a kind of sick relief that the secret was finally exposed. "You really want me to?" I asked, my voice barely a rasp. "I think," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "I think we both need to know where we stand." I felt a dizzying wave of heat wash over me. The cafe's jazz soundtrack morphed into a frantic, internal screech. I slid my chair back, the harsh scrape on the floor momentarily drawing attention, but I didn't care. I needed air, and I needed separation from the immediate, overwhelming pull she still had on me, even in this moment of betrayal. "Let's go," I said, grabbing my coat. "Not here. I can't read this in front of a bunch of strangers." She hesitated for only a second, then nodded, retrieving the phone but keeping her grip tight. We walked out of the cafe and into the cold afternoon, the sudden drop in temperature a shock. We didn't exchange a word as we hurried down the street, the silence more deafening than any argument. The unspoken tension between us was peaking, the attraction and the impending destruction intertwined, creating an electric, dangerous energy. Every glance, every accidental touch as we navigated the crowd felt charged with both lust and loathing. We found a quiet park bench beneath a massive, old oak tree, its branches bare and skeletal against the gray sky. We sat down, not side by side, but with a palpable space between us. Luna's hands were trembling as she unlocked the phone. "Here," she whispered, her voice cracking. She didn't hand me the device this time, but held it up, her thumb hovering over the draft message, forcing me to lean close to read the full text. My shoulder brushed hers, an unexpected intimacy that made my skin prickle, and for a flash, I wanted to pull her into me, to forget the phone, the message, and just hold on to the illusion of safety. But then, I forced myself to look, and the full, unsent message flooded the screen, instantly replacing all the heat and passion with a cold, devastating clarity. The message read, I need to tell Alex I'm leaving. Not just him, but the city. I've accepted the offer in Lisbon, and it's Liam who helped me realize. Before I could read the final, damning words, her grip slipped, and the phone tumbled from her frozen fingers, falling screen up onto the mossy ground. Just beside the draft message, a new notification flashed, drawing my eye, and it was a message she had sent, a recent reply to Liam. Meet me tonight. It's time to tell him. It's time for us. My breath hitched, catching painfully in my chest. The phone lay on the cold ground, a small, unforgiving altar to our ruined life. The two messages, the unsent farewell to me, and the active, explicit arrangement with Liam, slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. The Lisbon job, Liam's help, the urgency of meet me tonight. It's time to tell him. It's time for us. Lisbon. I choked out, the word feeling alien and sharp. You were going to leave me. Not just for Liam, but for a whole other continent. The raw pain of the betrayal sliced through the jealousy, leaving a deeper, colder wound. Luna didn't move. She stared at the phone on the ground, then slowly, agonizingly, lifted her eyes to mine. Her face was streaked with tears that were not for me, but for the mess she had created. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, Alex, she whispered, her voice stripped bare of its earlier defiance. I was going to send the first message, the one about Lisbon. It's an opportunity one can't pass up. The job came first, I swear. But then, Liam. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and irreversible ruin. But even as the devastation settled, that stubborn, dangerous attraction flared, a perverse reaction to the crisis. We were two magnets repelling each other with the force of truth, yet inextricably bound by years of shared intimacy. You said you loved me, I muttered, shaking my head in disbelief. We talked about forever. Was it all a lie? Every late night, every morning? Was he there even when we were together? She finally reached out, her hand hovering between us. Don't say that. What we had was real. But we grew safe, Alex. We grew predictable. And when Liam came along, he saw the part of me, the wild, ambitious part, that you stopped looking for. My vision tunneled. The sheer audacity of her confession, that our love was sacrificed for excitement and ambition, drove me to the brink. I closed the distance between us, not in anger, but in a sudden, desperate urge to reclaim what was mine, to force her to choose the past over this terrifying, forbidden future. I grabbed her shoulders, pulling her against the unforgiving bark of the oak tree. The physical contact was immediate, reckless, and intoxicating. Look at me, I commanded, my voice raw. Look at me and tell me you don't feel this. Our faces were inches apart. Her eyes were wide, glittering with fear and a deep, agonizing desire that mirrored my own. The attraction was so powerful it felt like a dangerous undertow, pulling us both under. Her lips parted, a small, involuntary gasp escaping her throat. I could feel the heat radiating from her skin, the frantic beat of her heart beneath my fingers. It was the most forbidden, risky moment of our relationship. Just as the suspense was about to break, just as I was leaning in, ready to claim a final, desperate kiss of farewell or fury, Luna's phone vibrated violently on the ground. The screen lit up with a video call, the name flashing brightly, Liam, in airport. I froze, hovering over her, the truth of her impending departure hitting me with renewed force. My eyes dropped to the screen, where Liam's eager, handsome face was smiling, oblivious to the emotional explosion he had just ignited. Luna swallowed hard, her eyes pleading with me. Don't, Alex. Please. But I saw the background on Liam's screen, not an airport departure lounge, but the bright, recognizable interior of the Lisbon arrival gate. He's not waiting to meet you, I hissed, the revelation cold and hard. He's already there. You were going to leave tonight, and you didn't even tell me he was waiting for you on the other side. The final, cruel twist was a shock I couldn't process. She was gone long before this moment. I let go of her abruptly, the finality of the betrayal shattering the last vestiges of attraction. She was already half a world away, emotionally and physically, moments from being entirely gone. The phone continued to ring, Liam's face beaming. I looked at Luna, seeing a stranger defined by secrets, and whispered the only word left. Go. The single word, go, was a command, a dismissal, and the final punctuation mark on our 4 years together. I stepped back, severing the last physical connection between us, leaving Luna framed by the skeletal branches of the oak tree. The ringing phone, Liam's expectant face glowing on the screen, continued its insistent plea. Luna finally picked up the device, her fingers shaking so violently she almost dropped it again. She looked down at it, then back at me, her eyes overflowing. The raw agony on her face was undeniable, a true emotional breakdown sparked by her own catastrophic choices. I can't take the call, she choked out, her voice ragged. Not in front of you. Why? I demanded, the high-energy confrontation finally erupting. Because you're worried about hurting my feelings? Or because you're worried about what he'll see on your face when you look at me? Tell him the truth, Luna. Tell him you blew up the future we built. Tell him you used him as an escape hatch, just like you used me as a security blanket for 4 years. The accusation hit her hard. She winced, burying her face in her hands for a moment, a soundless sob shaking her frame. When she looked up, the sadness was replaced by a desperate, fleeting defiance. It wasn't a blanket. It was real, Alex. But you settled. You stopped pushing, you stopped wanting more than the predictable routine, and I couldn't breathe. Lisbon is my ambition, my life, and Liam, he just gave me the courage to choose it. Courage? I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. That's not courage, Luna. That's cowardice. You hid the truth in a draft message, you conducted an affair under my nose, and you let me find out like this. Courage would have been telling me 3 months ago. The argument was draining, exhausting, yet necessary. It was the final, messy purge of all the unspoken resentments that had been rotting our foundation. Then, Luna did the boldest thing yet. With a deep, shuddering breath, she turned off the video call, rejecting Liam's presence and the easy escape he represented. She walked back to the bench, slid off her small backpack, and placed it on the ground. You're right, she confessed, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I was a coward. I used Liam, and I betrayed you. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Alex. But I can't leave without doing this right. She opened her bag, pulling out an envelope, a thick, legal-looking document. She slid it across the bench. It was a signed letter, terminating the lease agreement on our shared apartment. I've arranged everything. My flight is booked for midnight, and I've paid my share of the rent for the next 3 months. I'm leaving, Alex. For Lisbon. But I'm leaving alone. I looked from the document to her face. She was making the choice now, rejecting the temptation of Liam to own her decision, forcing herself to face the consequences alone. It was the only honest thing she had done in months. The dramatic high-energy confrontation was resolving, not with a reconciliation, but with a stark, painful acceptance of reality. I wish you well, Alex, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I truly do. She stood up, her small bag clutched in her hand. For a terrifying, beautiful second, our eyes locked, and I saw the ghost of the love we once had, the undeniable attraction that still lingered, wounded but not dead. I wanted to tell her to stay, to beg, to try to fight for that spark one last time. But I knew the future she had talked about was destroyed. The pain was too deep. I nodded curtly, the only response I could manage. She turned and began to walk away, a solitary figure moving toward an uncertain future. I watched until she reached the park entrance, and then, just before she disappeared, she stopped. She didn't look back. Instead, she took out her phone and, without hesitation, deleted the unsent draft message and blocked Liam's number forever. It was her final, devastating act of closure. I was left alone on the bench, holding the cold paper of the lease termination, ready to face a future that had just been stripped bare. I sat there for a long time, the lease termination letter a cold weight in my hand, watching the spot where Luna had vanished. The finality of her gesture, deleting the unsent message, blocking Liam, was a heavy, complicated form of closure. She had chosen her ambition, yes, but in that last moment, she had chosen integrity over an easy escape with her colleague. She had chosen to clean up the mess, however painfully, on her own. A bitter wind swept through the park, rustling the dry leaves, and I finally got up. I didn't head home. Instead, I found myself walking, not towards the city, but toward the familiar neighborhood bookstore where we had spent countless hours dreaming up plots and futures. I needed grounding. I didn't notice the sleek, black taxi idling near the curb outside the shop until I was right next to it. And I certainly didn't expect the passenger door to swing open. "Get in, Alex." My heart leaped. Luna was sitting there, not with a carry-on bag, but with her small backpack on her lap, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. The shock wiped away all my earlier anger. "The airport," I stammered, pointing vaguely toward the direction of her supposed flight. She gave me a tearful, shaky smile. "I know. The flight is in 3 hours. But I can't go." "Not yet." She patted the seat next to her. "Please. Just get in." I obeyed, sliding onto the leather seat. The taxi driver, a kindly-looking man, put up the privacy screen, giving us a precious, intimate cocoon. "I went home," she began, twisting the silver ring on her finger, the one I'd given her on our first anniversary. "I packed my bags, I ordered the cab, and I was halfway to the airport when I realized something terrible. The thing that made our relationship feel safe wasn't your predictability, Alex. It was my fear." She leaned in, and the undeniable magnetic pull returned, stronger and purer this time, stripped of deceit. I was terrified of failure in my career, so I manufactured drama with Liam and created a desperate escape route to Lisbon. I was running from fear, and running from the one person who always made me feel brave enough to stay. She reached out and laid her hand gently over mine. "When you told me to go, I knew I had already lost you. But when I deleted those messages, I realized the future I talked about wasn't destroyed by a draft message. It was destroyed by my silence. The actual future, the good one, it's still right here." I felt a rush of overwhelming emotion, relief, forgiveness, and the fierce, consuming love that had never truly died. I turned my hand and laced my fingers through hers. "What about Lisbon?" "I'm deferring the offer," she said firmly. "I told them I have something more important to fix first. Something that can't be fixed by running away." I looked into her hazel eyes, now brimming with a renewed clarity and devotion, and saw the promise of a future forged not from comfort, but from hard-won honesty. I gently pulled her towards me, and this time, the kiss was not desperate or forbidden. It was tender, full of forgiveness, and charged with the strong, exhilarating bond of a love that had faced destruction and chosen to rebuild. Pulling back slightly, she rested her forehead against mine. "Alex," she whispered, a new kind of challenge in her voice. "Let's stop talking about a future we talked about. Let's start building a future we choose right now." I squeezed her hand, a genuine, intoxicating smile finally breaking through. "Deal, Luna. And first, we're going to order a big pizza and finally finish that novel of mine." The taxi, our unplanned sanctuary, hummed softly as we embraced, two people battered by conflict but finally, truly, in sync. The ending was not a tragic farewell, but a messy, beautiful, and fiercely romantic second chance.